What if you once loved someone from a past life? There are moments in life when we meet someone and the heart skips a beat, not because they're beautiful, not because they're mysterious, but because something deep inside us already knows them from long, long ago. There are dreams that keep repeating, voices that make us cry, even though we've never heard them before, a pair of eyes that make us feel like we've lost something important. And then you begin to wonder, is this just imagination, or could it be the memory of a soul that once loved, once suffered, once lost, and is now returning? Some have remembered, not through books, not through films, but through their own hearts. These are true stories, fragments of memory that don't belong to this lifetime, told by souls who never truly forgot. And today's story begins with a woman named Sarah, a strange dream, a familiar voice, and a meeting destined across centuries. Are you ready to remember? Sarah never believed in past lives. Not really. She was a 42-year-old high school counselor living in a quiet part of Oregon, widowed for nearly 5 years. She had built her life around a new kind of normal one that moved gently around the silence her husband had left behind. His name was Daniel. They had been married for 11 years when he died in a car accident on a rainy October evening. There were no goodbyes, no final words, just the sound of a phone ringing at 1, the zsech, and then silence. For years, Sarah grieved the way society told her to. Therapy, journaling, meditation, letting go. But one thing never changed: the dreams. It started small. In her sleep, she would find herself walking along narrow, stone-lined canals, her bare feet echoing against wet cobblestones. She wore long, flowing dresses. Her hands were covered in lace, and always, there was a man watching from the shadows, not menacing, familiar, unshakably familiar. At first, she dismissed it as a trick of the subconscious, her mind coping, reaching, trying to keep something it had lost. But then came the voice, the same one that used to wake her in the middle of the night when Daniel was alive. Low, gentle, whispering words she didn't recognize, but somehow understood. Italian, Venetian, even. She began recording her dreams in a journal. And one morning, as she flipped through the pages, a question rose in her chest, quiet but undeniable. What if these weren't just dreams? That question was the beginning, the quiet call of something deeper. She couldn't ignore it anymore. One afternoon, Sarah found herself searching for local therapists who specialized in regression hypnosis, not for answers. Exactly, just clarity, something to ease the weight that memory, or something like memory, had placed on her heart. The session was nothing like she expected. She didn't fall asleep. She didn't see things like a movie reel. Instead, it felt like stepping into a memory she never knew she had. Her voice began to tremble as she spoke. She described a city of water, light, and masks, a man who made violins, and a young woman named Alessandra who had fallen deeply in love with him against her family's will. She described the man in vivid detail: the crease in his brow when he was focused, the small scar beneath his left eye, his voice deep, calm, always calling her cara mia. And as she spoke those words, her body shivered, because Daniel had called her that too. Not once, not twice, every single day until the day he died. Sarah left the session in tears, not because she was afraid, but because, for the first time in years, the grief in her chest had changed. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was recognition. She still didn't know what she believed. She wasn't trying to prove a theory, but she knew, in her bones, that what she had felt in that life had not been erased. Love, she realized, doesn't always start or end in one lifetime. This experience didn't fix everything. She still missed Daniel, still cried some nights. But there was a softness now, a sense that nothing had really been lost, only moved, shifted, waiting to be remembered. The lesson she carries now is simple. We are not just our thoughts. We are not just the bodies we walk in. We are a stream of memory, of emotion, of energy that flows beyond time. And if love is true, she says, it will find its way back to you. Maybe not in the way you expect, but in the way your soul recognizes. Sarah's story is not unique. Since then, thousands of people across the world have reported memories of places, people, and lives. They've never lived in this body. But can science explain that? Can we measure a memory? The brain doesn't claim. Or does something else carry these fragments? Something beyond the reach of neuroscience. Let's look deeper. Let's explore what modern science has not been able to explain and what that might mean about who we truly are. Science has mapped almost every part of the human body. We've decoded the genome, measured the speed of thoughts, and observed neurons firing in real time. We've even mapped emotions to regions of the brain. But when Sarah described a life she never lived complete with names, sounds, languages, and feelings that didn't belong to her current identity, there was no clear box to put that in. No brain scan could explain why she trembled when she spoke Italian, a language she had never learned. No memory study could account for the scar she described on the face of a man from 400 years ago. Because the truth is, modern science still doesn't know what memory truly is. We know the hippocampus is involved. We know synaptic patterns are part of it. But where exactly does a memory reside? And more importantly, where does it go when it doesn't belong to this life? Let's take a step back. Think about emotions, grief, love, fear. We can describe them. We can even measure their effects, heart rate, hormones, skin conductivity. But we cannot capture the emotion itself. We cannot measure the sensation of loss when someone you love is gone. We cannot explain why hearing a certain voice in a dream makes you weep like a child. What about intuition, or déjà vu, or the strange moments when you meet someone and feel like you've known them forever? Science calls these anomalies glitches, coincidences. But what if they're not? What if these are echoes, not from your mind, but from something older, deeper, and harder to quantify? What if memory is not stored in the brain, but through it, like a radio channel receiving signals from something far beyond its own structure? Dr. Ian Stevenson, a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, spent over 40 years studying children who claimed to remember past lives. He documented over 500 cases. Many included names, hometowns, family members, and even mannerisms that could later be verified. No brain trauma, no known psychological manipulation, just memory. That didn't belong. So where does that leave us? In a strange in-between, between the tools we've built and the truths we feel, between MRI scans and soul recognition, between science and something it can't yet touch. And maybe that's not a failure. Maybe it's an invitation, because science, when it's honest, admits its limits. It doesn't have to deny what it can't explain. It just has to ask the next question. And that question is this: if the brain cannot hold all memory, then what does? And is it possible, just possible, that we are more than biology, that we are vessels of energy, that emotion, memory, and soul may live, not inside us, but through us? Sarah's story opened that door, but it wasn't the only one. Across the world, researchers, doctors, and seekers are beginning to explore what once was dismissed as spiritual folklore, because slowly, science is starting to listen, and what it's hearing sounds a lot like what the soul has always known. Let's explore that next. What happens when science and spirit finally begin to meet? What happens when data starts pointing to the same truths that ancient mystics whispered centuries ago? It's time for the turn. For centuries, anything that couldn't be weighed, measured, or replicated was quietly pushed aside. Spiritual experiences, intuition, energy, they were called superstition, emotionally compelling, maybe, but not science. Until now, in recent years, something has begun to shift, not in temples, but in laboratories. Let's begin with light. Biophotons, tiny packets of light, have been discovered emitting from human cells, not just the eyes, from the heart, from the brain, from the hands, even from DNA. They're faint, but they're there, and they respond to emotion. When people meditate, the frequency and coherence of these biophotons change. When they feel love, gratitude, or compassion, there's more order. When they're stressed or afraid, disorder. This isn't guesswork. It's measurable. At the HeartMath Institute in California, scientists have spent decades studying what they call heart-brain coherence. They discovered that the heart has its own form of intelligence, a neural network, producing signals that influence the brain more than the other way around. In moments of deep calm or spiritual insight, the body enters a state of energetic alignment, not just psychological, electrical, magnetic, measurable. And then there's memory, or more precisely, morphic resonance. Rupert Sheldrake, a biologist from Cambridge, proposed that memory might not be stored in the brain at all. Instead, it could be accessed from a field, a pattern that exists beyond the body. He likened it to a radio picking up frequencies. Your brain isn't the storage, it's the receiver. This would explain why people like Sarah, or children who recall past lives, can tap into knowledge they never consciously acquired. It would also explain the phenomenon of collective memory, why cultures across the globe tell eerily similar stories about reincarnation, souls, and life beyond death. And what about frequency? Nikola Tesla once said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." For most of history, that quote was treated as metaphor. But today, it's being tested. Sound frequency therapy is being used to reduce anxiety and trauma. Electromagnetic stimulation helps stroke victims recover lost brain functions, and binaural beats, two slightly different tones played in each ear, can shift the brain into altered states. States that feel like regression, like remembering something that wasn't taught, but felt. So here we are, standing on a threshold where words once whispered by monks and mystics are now appearing in scientific journals. Emotion is frequency. The soul emits light. Memory can be accessed, even if it wasn't lived. Is it proof? Maybe not yet. But it's no longer dismissal either. Science hasn't fully explained the soul, but it's stopped laughing. And in that pause, a new space opens. A space where the mystical and the measurable begin to meet, where Sarah's tears in regression, where a child's memory of another name, another mother, where the sensation of "I've been here before" are no longer delusions. They are data points, waiting to be understood. So what does that mean for us? If the invisible is starting to be seen, if the intangible is slowly becoming measurable, then maybe it's time to ask, what else have we known all along, but didn't have the tools to prove them? Let's go deeper, not into theory, but into something more personal, more human, real lives, real transformations, real people who woke up one day and could no longer deny what their soul remembered. Next, we meet them. Something happens when you stop resisting what you've always known deep down. A quiet unraveling, a loosening of old beliefs that never really fit, a soft but undeniable shift. It's not dramatic, not fireworks or visions or thunder in the sky. It's simpler, more intimate. You wake up one morning and feel different. The way sunlight touches your skin feels like a memory. A stranger's glance on the train feels like a thread pulled from some forgotten bond. And when someone says, "You've changed," you smile because you have. That's what happened to Sarah. After her regression, she didn't become someone else. She became more of who she already was. The grief didn't disappear, but it deepened into something more sacred. She no longer saw Daniel's death as a random tragedy. She saw it as a page turned in a much longer book. She no longer feared forgetting, because now she trusted that what was true, what was real, could never be lost. And she wasn't alone. There's Ava, who always feared the ocean, until a regression revealed a past life drowned at sea. Now, she visits the shoreline every week, not to erase the fear, but to honor the soul that once didn't survive. Or Jacob, who always felt a strange pull toward Japanese calligraphy. During regression, he saw himself as a monk writing sutras by candlelight. He wept, not because it felt foreign, but because it felt like home. These realizations aren't facts you argue about. They're truths you feel in your bones. They don't demand belief. They simply ask for stillness, for listening. And once you feel it, something inside changes. You stop asking, "Is this real?" and begin asking, "What does this mean for how I live now?" You become slower to judge, faster to forgive. You treat people like they might have once been your mother, or your child, or your greatest teacher. You begin to understand we are not strangers to each other. We are souls passing through the same gates, wearing different names. And perhaps the greatest shift is this: you stop fearing death, because now you see it for what it is, not an end, but a threshold, not darkness, but transition, like walking through a door. You've already walked through many times before, like remembering how to breathe underwater, like waking from one dream into another. And with that realization, you stop living like you're running out of time. You begin living like every moment echoes across lifetimes. You become intentional with your energy. You speak less from ego and more from essence. You stop performing and you start remembering who you are and who you've always been. But don't take it from Sarah or Ava or Jacob. Take it from the quiet voice inside you, the one that's always been whispering the same thing. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not alone. You are remembering, and once that remembering begins, it doesn't stop. So what does it look like when ordinary people begin living from this deeper place? When everyday lives are changed not by religion or ritual, but by soul truth. That's what we'll witness next. Real stories, real people, real energy that never dies. Not everyone who remembers their past lives speaks on stages. Not all of them write books. Most don't even tell anyone, at least, not right away. Because remembering isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, personal, messy, and sacred. Like Melissa, a 35-year-old music teacher from Minnesota. For years, she struggled with unexplained depression. She had a good life, a partner who loved her, students who adored her. But every year, around early November, a deep sadness would settle into her chest. No event triggered it, no external cause. One day, during a past life regression session, more out of curiosity than belief, she saw herself as a young woman in Germany during World War I. She had been separated from her lover at a train station. He had left with the army. He never came back. The date, November 3rd. When she came out of the session, she cried for almost an hour, not because she finally understood her sadness, but because she had found it, named it, held it. And from that year on, November stopped hurting quite the same way. Or David, a retired fireman from New Jersey, strong, practical, not into spiritual stuff, but he kept having recurring dreams of pulling people from a burning church wearing armor, not a helmet. He dismissed it for years, until his granddaughter, during a school project on family history, found an old document. It mentioned a man, his ancestor, who had died rescuing villagers during a fire in 1600s France. The name was almost the same, so was the story. David doesn't claim to know for sure. But now, when people ask why he became a firefighter, he just says, "Maybe I always was." Then there's Layla, a nurse from San Diego. She never felt like she belonged in her family, always felt drawn to Indian temples, ancient chants, and the smell of jasmine oil. During Regression, she spoke in Sanskrit fluently, a language she had never studied. Since then, she's gone to India every year, not to find something, but to return to what already lives in her. These are not performances. They're not claims of superiority. They're simply fragments of the soul, surfacing when the mind is quiet enough to listen. And maybe you've felt something too, a place that feels like home, though you've never been, a person who makes your heart ache with a kind of knowing you can't explain, an irrational fear, a skill that came too easily. These aren't accidents, they're signatures, energetic fingerprints left across lifetimes, clues that the soul leaves behind, waiting for you to pick them up. And the moment you do, you're never quite the same again. You live more honestly. You stop rushing. You forgive more easily, not just others, but yourself. You begin to trust that the journey you're on isn't linear. It's circular, expansive, eternal. And when you hear someone else's story, like Sarah's or David's or Melissa's, you don't judge. You recognize, because part of you already knows. So maybe the next time something strange stirs in you, a memory, a pull, a moment that doesn't quite belong to this life, you won't dismiss it. You'll sit with it, listen, and maybe remember. But how do you begin this process yourself? If you're feeling the pull, what's the first step? It doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't need to travel to the mountains. You just need to be still. That's where we'll go next, into the gentle, human-sized doorway of awakening. Not theory, not magic, but practice. Simple, honest steps back to the center of who you are. You don't need to remember a past life to begin living from the soul. You don't need visions or languages from other centuries or dreams that shake the earth beneath your feet. Sometimes, all it takes is a pause, a deep breath, a willingness to feel what you've been too busy or too afraid to feel. Transformation doesn't always roar, it whispers. It begins in the small choices no one else sees. Like when you feel anger rising, and instead of reacting, you breathe. Like when you meet someone new, and rather than judge them, you wonder, have I known you before? Like when you sit with your own pain, not to fix it, but to honor it. These are the first steps, tiny awakenings, each one a soft knocking at the door of who you really are. If you're here listening, watching, wondering, then something in you is already shifting. Not because of this video, because of you. Because your soul has been waiting for you to turn inward, just for a moment. And when you do, you might notice a few things. Music starts to feel different. You'll find yourself drawn to songs with no words, just sound and space and memory. People will say something simple. Are you okay? And your heart will ache as if that question came from lifetimes ago. You'll feel tender, raw, open, and that's not weakness. That's the armor beginning to fall away. You might want to try past life regression, or just sit with your journal and ask, what part of me have I forgotten? You might not get answers right away. You might cry for no reason. You might laugh at how strange it all feels. That's okay. That's how remembering begins. There's no right path, no perfect method. Some people start with meditation, 10 minutes of silence, hands on heart. Others begin with frequency music, 528 Hz, 440 Hertz. the quiet tones that soothe something ancient within. Some just walk barefoot on the earth, feeling the pulse of something older than language. And slowly, gently, the soul begins to breathe again. You don't need to believe in anything. You just need to be willing to wonder, willing to feel, willing to listen, because the soul doesn't shout. It waits, and when you're ready, it responds. So don't rush. You're not late. You're not behind. The invitation is simple. Start where you are, with the breath in your chest, with the quiet pull towards something more, with the strange feeling that this life is not the whole story. And maybe that feeling is not a question. Maybe it's a memory calling you home. But before we end, there's one last step, a final moment to hold all of this gently, not as fact, not as proof, but as a whisper from your own heart. Let's close together. Maybe you don't have all the answers. Maybe you're not even sure what you believe. That's okay. You don't have to be certain. You only have to be open, because deep inside, you already know, not with your mind, but with something older, wiser, quieter. You felt it in dreams that stayed with you long after waking, in the way your chest tightens when a stranger's story feels like your own, in the pull toward places you've never been, and yet somehow miss, that knowing, that quiet remembering, it's always been there, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, you didn't find this video by accident. Maybe something inside you called it in, a part of you that remembers the lives you've lived, the love you've given, the pain you've endured, the lessons you've carried across time. You don't need to believe. You only need to pause, to feel, to listen, because the soul doesn't ask for followers. It asks for attention. And now that you've paused long enough to hear it, there's only one thing left to do. Keep going, keep remembering, keep choosing the path that feels like home. If this stirred something in you, stay. Subscribe, not for me, for you. So the next time your soul leaves you a message, you're here to hear it. And if no one's told you this lately, you are light, you are energy, you are not alone, and you have never truly been lost. You were simply waiting for a moment like this to remember. The screen fades now, but the story doesn't end. It lives in you. It always has. Take a breath, close your eyes, and listen. The soul remembers what the mind forgets. Welcome home.